Welcome back, Trailblazers. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a moment to talk about a tool that has completely transformed the way I plan and navigate my hikes, AllTrails Plus. As a Trailheads ambassador and the organizer of the Yakima Valley Trekkers, I'm out on the trails a lot. One of my favorite features of AllTrails Plus is the ability to edit and create my own maps. Conditions change, fallen trees, washed out sections, or even a last-minute reroute. And with AllTrails Plus, I can adjust my route on the fly and share it with others so everyone stays informed and safe. AllTrails Plus also gives you offline maps, wrong turn alerts, and 3D trail previews to help you stay on track and make the most of your adventure. And the best part, you can get 30% off an AllTrails Plus membership with my exclusive link in the episode show notes. So whether you're planning your next big trek or just looking for a new trail to explore, AllTrails Plus has you covered. Check it out and let's hit the trail. Welcome to Season 14 of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host, Ivan, and each week we're hitting the trails through conversations with extraordinary hikers from across the United States and beyond. Spring has a way of pulling us back out there. Muddy boots, wildflowers pushing through the thaw, and trails that feel brand new, even when we've walked them 100 times before. There's something electric about this season, when the days stretch longer, the snowpack starts its slow retreat, and the mountains finally say, "Come on up." This season, I've had the privilege of sitting down with hikers whose stories carry the same sense of renewal, of fresh starts, new summits, and the kind of momentum that only comes when you've been waiting all winter to lace up and go. From early season ridge walks and creek crossings swollen with snowmelt to the quiet joy of watching the landscape wake up mile by mile, the voices you'll hear this season remind us that the trail is always calling. You just have to answer. So shake off the cabin fever, air out the pack, and get ready. Season 14 is here, and the conversations ahead are as alive, layered, and full of possibility as a Pacific Northwest spring. What happens when you combine a trailhead, a cold pint, and a community that refuses to leave anyone behind? You get hiking for Brews. And in this episode, we're sitting down with the woman who brought it back to life. Nicole is the organizer of Hiking for Brews, a DMV-based group drawing anywhere from 20 to 80 hikers across Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia. Originally founded in Baltimore, Nicole revived the concept post-COVID when she moved back to the area and wanted to make friends the best way she knew how, on a trail. In this episode, we talk about the story behind her iconic watermelon tote cooler, a 1979 heirloom that's become her signature at every trailhead, why Hiking for Brews is built around connection over mileage, and how volunteer hike leads have helped the group scale from biweekly to nearly weekly events. Nicole also shares tips for starting your own hiking group, how she avoids burnout as a leader, and why good hiking shoes will always be her non-negotiable. Plus, she drops some exciting personal news live on the podcast. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Nicole. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I have a really exciting guest with me today. Her name is Nicole, and she's going to be sharing about what she's doing with her group, Hiking for Brews, out in the DMV. That's Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia. Thank you so much, Nicole, for coming on the podcast. We always like to start off by having our guests share a little bit about themselves and how they got started hiking.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. So I'm Nicole. I run a group called Hiking for Brews. So first and foremost, I got started hiking as a young girl. I was in Girl Scouts, and quick funny story about that is I actually got tired of all the crafting and whatnot with Girl Scouts, and I ended up quitting that and joining Cub Scouts with my brothers. So I've been an avid hiker since the ripe age of 5 years old.
You know, we were talking about this before we started recording, but I feel like the concept of your group is, something that I think the majority of hikers and backpackers can relate to, because especially on this podcast, the go-to meal after a hike is a burger and a beer or pizza and a beer. For you, how did Hiking for Brews kind of come about?
Yeah, the group was not originally started by me. It was started by a woman named Rue in the Baltimore area. And so I just really have to pay tribute to her starting it. But what resonated most with me about the group was, when you're hiking on a trail, it can be sometimes difficult to socialize. You're often walking, single file or 2 by 2. And so I really like the concept of having that after hike get together where people can come together and have a little bit more space to socialize. And then, of course, yes, pizza, burgers, beer, all of the great things after the hike. And I really love the brewery concept because, after a hike, you might be grimy and sweaty. And so walking into a fancy restaurant might not be the best option. So we definitely love our breweries here and are really lucky to have so many breweries that have great food options as well.
And I got to ask, Nicole, just because I feel like the brewery scene has exploded across the United States. Do you guys have a rotation of breweries that you go to, or are you trying to hit as many new ones as possible?
It's a little bit of a mix. So we do have an annual tradition of a couple different hikes that we make sure we do every single year. So every February, we go to Maryland Heights out in Harper's Ferry and Harper's Ferry Brewing. And then, in the springtime, when there are spring flowers, like this upcoming weekend, there's always a bluebell hike at Bull Run Park over in Northern Virginia. And we go to Eavesdrop as well. So we definitely have some of those staple hikes. But, there's always new breweries popping up, new hikes that we want to do. And so a lot of people will suggest different hikes, even that I haven't done before, or different breweries that they want to check out. And so we just kind of fit it in the schedule with whoever's feeling a day trip a couple hours away, or if they want to just do something pretty hyper local. So you'll see us do some repeat hikes and breweries, and then of course some new ones as well.
And like you mentioned, you weren't the original founder, but you really have brought this group back to life. Can you share a little bit about that story of how you kind of helped reestablish the group and make it what it is today?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Southern Maryland and I ended up moving into Baltimore City, and I didn't really have friends in that area. And so I stumbled across Hiking for Brews, and I really just felt welcome in that group. And it was something that I really enjoyed looking forward to, hiking with the group on the weekends. One thing that it did teach me too is just how many hikes and breweries are in the Baltimore area. When people think of Baltimore that aren't from the area, they typically think of things like The Wire, and they don't necessarily think that there's a big hiking scene. And so, that started my appreciation for the group. And so I ended up moving to Philadelphia, and then the original founder, Rue, ended up moving away and the group dissolved. And of course, COVID happened and a lot of people weren't socializing. And so I ended up moving back into the area, and I wanted to make friends and get back out there and get out hiking again. And so I thought, hey, why not just restart this concept and see what happens? And it kind of just took off from there.
And Nicole, one story that caught my attention was the red jacket story turning into a watermelon tote that you shared on Instagram. And it's such a small but powerful detail. Can you tell the listeners about this story?
Yeah, sure. So my first hike with Hiking for Brews and, the original group, I was a participant that I was showing up to this new hike with these folks that I had never met before. I didn't know what anybody looked like, and I was attending a hike in a city. So a ton of different people around, and I was really nervous of what if I go up to the wrong group? Is this the right person that I'm approaching? And Rue, the founder of the group, she had put in the comments of that hike that she was going to be wearing a bright red jacket, just something that made her stand out and made it easy to approach and find her in this large crowd. And I'll never forget that. And that's really what inspired me to find an artifact that I could bring to every hike that made me stand out so people knew exactly what they were looking for. And so my husband's grandmother had this watermelon tote cooler bag. It's actually almost 50 years old. It was manufactured in 1979. And I thought this giant watermelon tote stands out. Not a lot of people, I don't think, have this. So I'm just going to bring that to every hike and tell people to look out for it. And I think that that's just been a cue for people to know that they're essentially in the right place.
Oh, I love that story. And I love that idea, Nicole. I used to put out my smaller flag when we were meeting up for carpooling or at the trailhead. And it's one thing that I haven't done in a while, but I think, that small gesture of just something unique that's visible can really help, especially especially for first timers trying to figure out which group is which, especially at a busy trailhead or in a carpool location. Yeah, those small gestures really make an impact on people's first time experiences. And with you now being the leader of the group, what have you learned about how tiny gestures shape people's first time experience with the group?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of newcomers show up and they're pretty nervous. They're not sure what to expect. And these tiny gestures just go a really long way. And, I'm so thankful for the hikers that have joined many of our hikes before and are repeat hikers. And they've kind of picked up on this too of how important those tiny gestures are, just introducing yourself, asking about someone if it's their first hike or their fifth hike and just really making sure that people feel welcome. And I'm so thankful for the folks in our group that just know how important those tiny gestures are.
And one thing that I love that you're doing, and I think anybody that is leading a group or is part of a group knows that it's sometimes difficult to find the right trails, the right hikes to fit as many people's comfort levels as possible. And you mentioned this early on in the recording, but you're really about building connection. And sometimes it can be hard on a trail, especially a narrow one. And your hikes aren't necessarily about crushing miles. How intentional are you when designing that balance between movement and social space?
Yeah, so pretty intentional. So, I know there's this differing opinions within the hiking community. A lot of people seem to prefer solo hikes or group hikes. And this group is really meant to be a community building space. And so that's going to take precedence first and foremost. And then, of course, the movement and the brewery, that's additional as well. So one of the rules that we follow are don't be an asshole. That's our only main big rule for all participants. And then the second rule is never leave anybody behind. And so, yeah, we want to get some movement in, get some exercise. But at the end of the day, it's really about building those connections between people and making sure that we're a cohesive group versus trying to just knock out 10, 15, 20 miles. There are certainly other groups like that in this area that they're more of the adventure sports or, pushing PRs and things like that. And that's just not us. And we really stand by that.
And one thing that I'm impressed, Nicole, is the groups that you've been able to have out. I think it ranges anywhere from, 20 to 60 people. And I love that you can bring that many people out into an outdoor space. And I'm wondering, in your personal experience, how has it been managing those larger groups on the trail? Because it's definitely something that I'm curious about. I think the biggest group I've had is like 24 to 30, but I would love to be able to bring out, 60 people out on a trail or out in a outdoor setting.
Yeah, for sure. The first time that we had a ton of people on a hike, I remember it was at Union Craft Brewing in Baltimore, and I think that was pushing 80 folks, and I was absolutely terrified. But what I've learned is that hiking groups, particularly ones that involve beer, it just brings out really, really cool people. And so what's happened over the years is that about, I would say, 3/4 of our group are repeat hikers that keep coming back. And then we get some newcomers as well. And so those people that have attended multiple hikes, they just naturally kind of step up as leaders in themselves. A lot of them have even led hikes as well. And so, while I might be leading at the front, there's going to be someone in the back that's the caboose, making sure that no one's being left behind. And then people kind of intermingle, just making sure that people feel comfortable and bringing them into that community. And so, again, I say it over and over again, I'm so thankful for the people that have joined the community and especially the hiking leads that come out and help in that regard.
And I know that doing a hiking group takes a lot of effort and consistency. And I know that a lot of people are thinking about starting their own groups in their communities. Can you give some tips or advice on starting groups? And then maybe what's something people don't see behind the scenes that involves leading groups or forming a group?
Yeah, sure. If you're thinking about starting a hiking group, I just would say do it. Don't overthink it. I remember my first hike I led, I think I got 4 or 5 people. I was very excited about that. And we kind of just worked together to figure out what makes sense. You'll kind of tweak things along the way, but just go out and do it. And then one of the things I would think behind the scenes is just the amount of planning that goes into it, myself and the other hiking leads do. It's often scoping out different locations, picking a hike and a brewery that's going to be within 15 or 20 minutes from the trailhead, scoping out how many parking spaces there are at the trailhead to make sure that we're not overrunning the trail and taking parking spaces away from other people that might want to enjoy it as well. Checking for events, checking trail conditions, contacting the brewery if we need to ahead of time to let them know that we're coming. So there's a lot of intentional work, and there's a lot of people, not just myself, but within the group that do a lot of that legwork just because they see the value in what they're bringing to the local hiking community.
I think one of the biggest lessons for me last year was checking community event calendars, because one of my spring hikes I had scheduled in the Yakima Canyon, and that weekend just so happened to be the Yakima Canyon Marathon, where they shut down the canyon, and it wasn't really well publicized because they're still trying to rebuild from COVID. But now definitely that's something that's part of my monthly check, is just, are there any events that could impact both the road or the trailhead that could make things difficult to access? But yeah, that was a huge, huge change for me in the last year.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And we've had our fair share of instances like that too. As soon as you said marathon, I thought of, I remember that time we went to Quiet Waters and there was a run going on and they were running the loop in the exact opposite way that we were going. And sometimes, you can't prevent those things. And luckily, a lot of people in the hiking community, if you're willing to get, kind of grimy and dirty and out in nature, you're pretty laid back and you roll with the punches anyway.
And I got to ask, because I'm guessing it's probably a mix of this, but do you ever plan the hike around the brewery or the brewery around the hike?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say usually the hike is what is decided upon first. Sometimes there are new breweries that open up and then we, want to go there and check it out and then we find the hike. But yeah, I would say most of the time we plan the hike first and then pick the brewery. And luckily in the DMV area, pretty much every hike is within 15 or 20 minutes of a local brewery. And there's so many breweries that are actually just right on the trail as well, which makes for a fun group hike too.
And you've been really good about expanding events. I think you went from biweekly hikes into almost weekly events. What's changed in the community to help make that growth possible?
Definitely our volunteer hiking leads that are just about as enthusiastic about leading this group as I am. And I'm just absolutely so thankful for them. There's a lot of people that step up and are willing to scope out a hike and brewery combo and lead them. And yeah, I know the past actually 2 hikes and the next upcoming hike are being led by people besides myself. So that's what makes it great that we can start hosting more of these events because, the biweekly thing started off with me. That's where I felt like my capacity kind of sat with being able to manage all of the other things going on in my life. But having help definitely allows us to do more events.
One thing that you've done is highlight some really special spots and breweries. The ones that kind of stick out are Quiet Waters, Plus Forward Brewing, and help me out with the name. Is it 10 Eek?
So I mispronounced this for years. It's actually 10 Ike, and I just learned this within the past 6 months. It means around the oak or something like that. It's like a Dutch term.
Yeah, so we have a place that we have gone a few times called Bronjar, and for the longest time I had the hardest time, so I just nicknamed it the Bron, but now I finally am able to pronounce it as well.
Love that.
Now, Nicole, what makes a brewery hiking for Brews approved in your book?
As long as it has food, honestly, we want to make sure that there's going to be enough space for us. Luckily, a lot of the breweries in the area have that. And of course, if it's a smaller brewery like Forward Brewing, which we love, will reduce the number of people that we can have on the hike just to make sure that we're not overrunning any of the businesses. But I would just say generally any brewery that's welcoming and has food, and that ends up being about 99% of the breweries in the area.
There's folks that don't drink, but I feel like the environment that you guys create is very special that allows people who might not be into beer to still fit in and have a great experience at these social gatherings. What's one recommendation that you would have for folks that maybe are on the fence because they might not necessarily be into beer, but still want that social aspect?
So I think it depends on the person's comfort level. We have folks in the group that they don't drink and they really don't like being around drinking, and that's perfectly fine. And so what they'll do is they'll join our hike and then they'll dip out after the hike. And then we have those folks that I don't like beer, I prefer cocktails and things like that. And a lot of the breweries in the area have things like non-alcoholic options or cocktails, mocktails, sodas, different things like that, where they can still come and join at the brewery and have a non-beer drink and have fun. And then we have, of course, the fun third group of folks that sometimes skip the hike in the beginning and just join the brewery experience too, which we definitely get a kick out of. But certainly if you're thinking about joining a group, and of course it has beer in the name, that might be a little bit intimidating, but there's certainly no pressure to drink, no pressure to drink beer. You're welcome to join us for the hike, or if you want to join us for the brewery as well and find some other options, we're certainly open to that.
I love that there's a group of folks that just go for the brewery and social experience. That's awesome. That just shows like the environment that you guys create where, here I am thinking maybe it's folks that aren't into beer, but on the flip side, there could be some folks that maybe aren't necessarily into hiking, but do love, socialize and go to a brewery. That's really awesome.
Yeah. And people have other plans, people have lives outside of, the hiking group and things like that. And anytime that we get with them to spend together is great. So we might tease them a little bit once they get there about skipping the hike, but certainly glad that they still chose to join us.
Nicole, one thing that I was really impressed on is that you shared that you're afraid of heights. For me, being here in Central Washington, I'm still getting over my apprehension of hiking in and around rattlesnake country. Typically, come April, May, they start coming out in our local trails. So then that sends me up into the mountains. And I don't come back down into the valley until fall, until the first frost. In your experience being afraid of heights, has that ever influenced the hikes that you choose or challenged you maybe as a leader by doing some of these trails with maybe a ledge or a steep drop off?
Yeah, so I'm sorry about the rattlesnakes. That sounds pretty terrifying. But yeah, as far as choosing hikes, I will say that all of the hikes that I've ever done where there's been, big summit or a ton of exposure to heights, I have not chosen myself, but I have gone as a willing participant. And so I think that's the great thing about being in a group for myself versus solo hiking, because there are people in the group that want to do different hikes where I may not have picked them myself because of that fear, but have done it willingly alongside of other hikers too that were more interested in it. And so I've gotten over my fear a little bit. I'm still working on it, but yeah, I'm super thankful for those that have pushed me out of my own comfort zone, even in my own group.
Nicole, I feel like I've asked this to other group leaders, and I'm curious what your experience has been because you have a full-time job, you have side gigs alongside running this group, and in your own personal experience, where does hiking fit into your own personal life versus the responsibility of being the group lead?
Yeah, it's a pretty blurred line for me, to be honest. I will say when I first started leading the group, I did struggle a little bit because I was trying to push the limits of how many hikes that I was hosting. And I started to feel burnt out. And I kind of made this rule for myself of, you're doing this for free. This is volunteer activity. And so my number one goal was to make sure that the group was sustainable. So I found that once it starts not feeling fun is when I don't want to do it anymore. And so I see hiking now as something that just fits into my life versus that responsibility, if that makes sense. And that's what I tell the hiking leads too when they're thinking about different hikes and when they're going to do them and how many people they're going to have. I just say, as long as you're having fun with it, do what you want to do and people will have a good time. Because once you start feeling like it's that a burden or that responsibility kind of hanging over your head, it doesn't feel as exciting every time when showing up for a hike. And I think that shows through as a leader as well.
And I've definitely tried to balance that where, at least in my own experience, hiking as a group lead versus hiking with, solo or with just a small group is very different. So in order to avoid feeling that burnout, I try to give myself at least one weekend, if not 2 weekends, where I can go on my own or maybe with just a small group of friends and do some of the trails outside of the group just so I can have that experience. Because I don't know if you feel it too, Nicole, but sometimes on group hikes, I'm so focused on like group safety, on trail safety, that I'm not fully present in nature because I'm, juggling the front of the group, the back of the group. Is everybody having a good time? Is everybody safe? So it's a different experience as to when you're just hiking solo or without the group.
I have never felt more seen. Yes, that is spot on. It's like you've got to be on all the time and just making sure that you're attending to everybody else and, solo hiking or having, 1 or 2 trusted friends there. It's a lot easier, but it's definitely different than what you get out of having that group hike experience too.
Now, Nicole, what's something hiking has given you that you didn't realize you needed when you first joined the meetup in 2019?
A lot of personal growth, a lot of realizing, what my limitations were on socializing. I'm an introvert, so I realized very quickly that while I love doing the group hikes, I also need some downtime to myself to kind of recover and plan for the next time to make sure that I'm getting the most out of the experience as well. And so finding that balance has really given me to this great sense of community. I've met so many amazing people through this group and become friends with people that, I would have never run into in any other circumstances, people that live a few hours away on the other side of Maryland and things like that. And so I would definitely say a lot of personal growth and that sense of community.
And Nicole, you've mentioned and given a lot of credit to your volunteer leads, your hike leads. In being the founder of the group, what have you noticed makes a great leader in your group or in a hiking group?
We kind of attract these people naturally because people that are signing up to do group hikes are choosing it for that social aspect, I've found. And so the hike leads have kind of fallen into that leader position naturally because they're just meant to do that. And I think different traits that stand out to me that I really appreciate about them is that they're always making sure that people are good. Like they're not leaving people behind. They're making sure that people are okay on the trail, that everybody's together. They also make sure people are welcome. Everyone takes a minute or two before we actually get to hiking to ask about people and get to know them before we get on the trail. And I say it over and over again, but the hiking leads, I really just appreciate how inclusive they are of everybody that joins the group. And they're really doing this on a volunteer basis. And I just, think that's really cool.
And I feel like every group has its lore, whether it's inside jokes, traditions, maybe, small rituals. And for me, I think I've spoken about this on previous episodes, but the first piece of Yakima Valley Trekkers merch was a t-shirt and stickers for a hike that our group has dubbed Unpleasant Valley. The original trail name is Pleasant Valley, and the reason it became unpleasant is because it's in a wilderness zone, so we had to split up into 2 groups of 12, and I led the first group. Second group was led by another member, and there was a trail junction that we were supposed to hit that took us across a river that was pretty low in the summer, and it just kind of would be a cool place to cool off. Well, the trail is also multi-use, so horses can be on the trail, and I had created an arrow with sticks and rocks off the trail to kind of point them in the direction of the trail junction, but 2 big old horses came through and kind of destroyed the arrow, and they missed the trail junction, and what should have been a 4-mile hike ended up being 8 miles for them, and they were not expecting that. So that's where the Unpleasant Valley joke came from for Yakima Valley Trekkers. Does your group have any similar situations or maybe inside jokes or traditions that have grown over the last couple of years?
That is hilarious. And yes, we do. So one of the hiking leads in the group, his name is Mike. He leads probably the most hikes secondary to me. He is I like to refer to him as a jester. He just always does these funny things at hikes. And so people that have come to many hikes and have grown to know Mike know don't always fall for his tricks. And so he does a couple different things that always make me laugh, but one of which is at the trailhead, people that know Mike know don't leave your car unlocked. And he's not taking things out, but he's putting things in your car when you're not looking. Things that there is no reason for you to need or ever want. I think one of the first things he put in my car was a Bill Clinton nesting doll with many of the, let's just say, the women that he was associated with. And so I don't still have that nesting doll. Thankfully, I could not find a place to put it in my house. But that's one thing that he does. So make sure your car is locked around Mike. The other thing is if Mike says he has a shortcut, that shortcut is typically a couple miles longer. So if you join us on a hike and Mike says, hey, follow me this way, we're going to take a shortcut, just know that you are in for a much longer hike.
Oh my goodness, the nesting doll is hilarious. I would not know what to do if I came across that in my car. Like, where the heck did this come from?
It definitely took that, and I think it was like a children's Jurassic Park bubble bath set where I started putting together that someone's putting these things in my car, and I think it might be Mike. So, yeah.
Now, Nicole, we talked about the watermelon tote. It's iconic at this point. Have there been any other accidental traditions that have stuck for the group?
Yeah, I think our annual tubing trip, I don't even know how we actually started doing this, but every August we go on the Gunpowder River on a tubing trip. I don't know why, because it's always like 55-degree water temperatures, and we always end up scheduling it for a cloudy day. But that's something that we've started doing annually. Kind of, I guess we do hike. We hike to put in and then float back, but it's one of those things that people have grown to love despite, it being freezing cold temperatures when we're actually in the water.
And I love that you guys are doing these additional things besides hiking. I think I saw some sledding days. You even do themed hikes, and you have hikes that are dog friendly. How much do those extras shape the identity of the group now?
Yeah, so a lot of folks have come up with really cool creative ideas of different things to do to kind of, add some fresh ideas into the mix. And so the sledding days stands out to me because Eric, one of our hiking leads, had actually recommended doing that because we don't get a ton of snow here in Maryland, but for some reason this past winter we got over a foot, which is a lot for us in the DMV. And he still wanted to get people together and, have a pint and do something active, but not everybody out here has snowshoes or yak tracks and things like that. And so he said, hey, why don't we just go ahead and do some sledding? And so that's what we did. We sled at a local brewery, and that was really fun. And so I think just giving people the opportunity to be creative and do some things, maybe hiking related, maybe hiking adjacent, so that way they can feel, like they're a bigger part of the group and contributing as well. So we have a lot of fun mixing it up for sure.
Oh, yeah, you definitely look like you guys are having a blast on your Instagram on some of these events. Now, Nicole, you kind of answered this previously, but I feel like with the growth of breweries across the nation, the concept of hiking for brews is something that folks can do in their own community. If folks are interested in, copying the concept, what's the first thing that you would tell them?
So I would say, if you're looking specifically to do hiking in breweries, what I usually do when I'm trying to pick a combo is start with Google Maps. I pick a hike or a brewery that I want to go to and then just do some sleuthing on there to see what combination might make sense. All Trails is another great resource because we know a lot of the hikes aren't actually listed on Google Maps. So if you're interested in picking a hike first, that's a great way to do it. Google Maps has different views, so you can look at the satellite view to kind of get an idea of what the trailhead looks like, the parking situation. And then, of course, if you're looking to do this in a group setting, some of our hiking leads will actually go to the trailhead and the brewery agree first with their significant other or a friend to scope things out. So it's pretty easy. You just got to put some time aside to be intentional about it.
And for those that are starting a group and even for hiking for Brews, what does success look like for a group, a year from now? Does that necessarily mean like more people, more hikes, or is it something less tangible?
So I would say we have certainly grown over the past couple of years, but the main priority, first and foremost, is to be sustainable. I want to make sure that this group lasts as long as it possibly can. And so the most important thing is figuring out a balance of how many hikes we're hosting, how many hiking leads are willing to do this. And so, yeah, it's great having more people. And of course, we want more people to join in and find the group. And it would be lovely if we could have weekly hikes every week. But I definitely just want to make sure that the group is still existing years from now. So that way people have that consistent community that they can turn to when they're looking to, meet other people and socialize and things like that.
And I feel like a lot of people, including myself, have been that person that's new to the group or new to a hike, and they might be nervous about showing up for their first group event. They might be standing in the parking lot, not knowing anyone. What would you say to that person on their first hiking event?
Yeah, we've all been there. It's always nerve-wracking to meet new people, especially as adults. I always joke that it's a lot easier making friends as kids, and you just got to get over that first hurdle. It's really hard. You have to put yourself out there and, of course, take it at your own pace. We have people that show up, they join the hike, and then they feel like they hit their social limit for the day, and it was a lot for them, and we totally respect that. And then they join the next time and stay for the whole thing. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in coming out, certainly join us. Everyone in the group is super friendly and welcoming. And again, we've all been there. Just know that everybody's welcome.
And Nicole, for folks that are listening in and around the DMV area, or maybe they're going to be visiting the DMV area this year, where are some of the places they can find more information about the group and possibly sign up for one of these hikes?
Yeah, so we are on Meetup, so you can start there. Or, of course, if you're following us on Instagram, you can follow the link in our bio and then join Meetup. It's totally free to do so. Our group is private, but you don't have to answer any crazy questions to get into the group. That's mostly just to keep the bots out and things like that. So look for us on Meetup and then follow us on Instagram.
Oh, Nicole, now I feel seen because I had to turn my group private within the last year because of the bots. So yeah, just adding those questions was a huge difference in bringing down the bots and the weird comments that would come from some of these bots.
Yes, for sure. And it's hard sometimes figuring out, who on Meetup is a bot or not. But yeah, it certainly helped and then reduced the number of notifications that people are getting that are not related to hiking.
Well, Nicole, these last couple questions are questions that we like to ask all our guests that come on the podcast. We did make some updates to season 14, but the first one is, in your own personal experience, or maybe even the group experience, do you have a pre-hike ritual or maybe a first mile mindset?
Yeah, so I get teased about this one a lot, but I do always start the hike with an icebreaker. And the reason that we do that is especially for those newcomers that, they don't know anything about anybody else. So we want people to introduce themselves, say generally what city they're coming from in the area, and then we have a question. And so I really love doing this because it gives people an easy way to start off a conversation when they actually get onto the trail. And we always learn something new. At one of the recent hikes that I was at, I asked the question, what's something most people don't know about you? And Jason, one of our hiking leads, who I've known for 3 or so years now, I've learned that he was a DJ in a past life. And so that's something I don't think I ever would have figured out on the hiking trail if I hadn't asked that question. So yeah, definitely icebreaker questions we like to ask.
Oh, I love that. I might have to borrow that one for my group. Now, this one I'm really curious about, but for your own personal experience, what's your go-to post-hike meal and drink?
Well, obviously I have to say beer. So ideally, I would say like pork barbecue sandwich with a hazy IPA, but there are a lot of really great breweries in Maryland that have killer pizza. So if you find yourself in the area, definitely find one of those breweries.
And then in your own personal hiking experience, what's one piece of gear you'll never compromise on?
Good hiking shoes, because you will regret not having good hiking shoes once you end up getting a ton of blisters.
Now, on the flip side, Nicole, what's the most overrated piece of outdoor gear in your personal experience?
So there's not one piece of gear per se, but one thing that I view as overrated is expensive hiking gear. There are so many different advertisements for different things that cost $300, $400, $500 that, make you feel like you need something real fancy to get out and hike, and that's just not the case. Anything that might be overpriced that make you feel like you can't get out on the trail with what you have.
Couldn't agree more. Feel like a lot of people already have the necessary gear and clothing to go enjoy a hike. You don't necessarily need specific brands or specific gear to just go out on a trail.
Exactly.
Now, has there been a trail or an adventure that has changed you over the last couple of years?
Oh, there was one. It was a short trail that I ended up going on a hike with my mom and my grandmother, and this was at Botany Bay down in South Carolina. And so if you haven't ever heard of this before or seen this place, you end up walking out to a beach that's just covered in large driftwood, and it almost feels otherworldly. And that was just one of those moments that stood out to me of this is just an incredible place that I would have never anticipated being here. And, it's not a national park. It's not a huge, tourist place or anything like that. And I think that's just the reminder too of how many cool hiking trails there are out there that may not be on our radar.
Gotta love those hidden gems when you find them.
Absolutely.
Now, Nicole, this one could be either your own personal experience or maybe a group experience. But have you ever turned around short of a summit or a goal? And what did that teach you or the group?
Yeah. So luckily in Maryland, we don't have a ton of elevation. I think our highest point is around 3,000 feet. So there aren't a lot of opportunities for us to, I guess, push ourselves to some of the places that might be out in like the Pacific Northwest. So we haven't had the opportunity yet to, determine that we need to turn short of a summit. But I will say that we have definitely had those moments of we're mid-hike and we hear thunder and we need to turn around. And of course, that wasn't planned. Maryland weather can be quite unexpected and, people naturally are going to be disappointed, but we always have to put safety first. And I think that's really, the same sentiment that follows the turning around short of a summit, that you want to make sure that everybody's safe first and foremost. And that's just something that it happens. It's inevitable.
Yeah, Mother Nature and weather, especially I feel like on the East Coast, can change so rapidly. And yeah, safety first. The trail's going to be there after the storm or, weather rolls on through. So love that. Now, the last question, Nicole, is, are there any hiking or adventure goals that you have personally for 2026, as well as for the group?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Personally, I would say just to continue hiking. I did just find out that I am about 2 months pregnant. And so that's something that's been in the back of my mind of how long can I hike for? Can I hike 8 months, 9 months into the pregnancy and things like that? So that's something that I'm navigating now. So I would just say continue to hike through my pregnancy. And then I would say from a group perspective, just maintaining that consistency, managing with myself and the other hiking leads to keep up with that biweekly, at the least, schedule to make sure that the group stays consistent.
Congratulations, Nicole. That's wonderful news.
Thank you.
We had a guest who I think she said she was on the trail, nothing strenuous, but up to 9 months. So definitely that's exciting news for you and your family. And
thank you. Yeah, that's really great to hear that they were still hiking at 9 months. I was just thinking, oh man, that's going to be right around fall foliage time. So I'm definitely inspired by a lot of the other, hiking mamas and parents out there that, hike up until delivery time. So it's super impressed.
All right, Nicole. Well, that was it for the regular questions. We always like to end the episode with our segment of this or that questions. I'm going to give you some hiking related topics and you just choose which one you prefer out of the two personally. And you can say both or neither. But the first one is, do you prefer dense forest or wide open views?
Dense forest.
And then the next one is peak bagging or wandering miles?
Definitely wandering miles.
And then this one has been a tough one for some guests, but a cabin stay or tent camping?
I mean, I love both, but I will definitely choose tent camping. I just feel like that's the full camping experience.
And then I know that you already talked about how important footwear is, but I know that this other option can be pretty vicious on the East Coast. But if you had to choose, would you choose bug bites or blisters?
Well, you said I could choose neither, so I will choose that. But I will say yes, especially the horse flies out on the East Coast by the water. Oh, yeah, I would take blisters over bug bites any day.
Now, for this season, our most controversial one is when you're out on the trail, do you like to listen to music or an audiobook or podcast, or do you prefer to just have nature and outdoor sounds?
Nature sounds every time. And here's the deal. If you want to listen to music on the trail, just put an AirPod or headphones on.
Now, this next one's about your footwear. Do you prefer trail runners or hiking boots?
Trail runners. Hiking boots, of course, when you need them for more stability, but the types of trails that we typically hike in the DMV, trail runners work just fine.
And then when it comes to the footwear outsole, do you care if it's Vibram branded outsole or it could be just any regular outsole?
Any regular outsole. I will say, though, this past winter, I did end up getting a pair of Uggs that they made Gore-Tex, and it had the Vibram outsole, and I was completely sold on that. So if you want comfy shoes that, for flat hiking in the wintertime, that was a great option.
Wait, so they were Ugg boots that were waterproof, but then also had the Vibram outsole?
Yes. Isn't that so cool? I never in my life thought that they would ever come up with something like that. But it's great for, short, flat walks, if you want to take a walk out in the rain and things like that. And they held up really, really well. So cannot recommend enough.
Now, this next one is a tough one, but if you had to choose between these two types of summit conditions, would you go with a windy summit or a cloudy summit?
Cloudy. And I think this goes back to my fear of heights. Being up on a summit where there's a ton of wind, when you're afraid of heights, it doesn't really bode well. So I would take cloudy summit any day.
And then this one's a tough one, but national parks or hidden gems?
Hidden gems.
And then I think I know the answer to this one, but spring wildflowers or fall colors?
So I do love fall colors, especially out in Western Maryland, but I am going to have to go with spring flowers. And the reason is because the season is just much longer. Every week there's a different spring flower blooming, and that's something that I really love about this area.
And then the last one, Nicole, do you like type 1 fun or type 2 fun?
Ooh, I am more of a type 1 person myself, but I will say the most fun I've ever had were with type 2 friends.
Oh, I like that response. That's a good answer. Well, that was it, Nicole, for the this or that questions. For folks that want to learn more about the group and see what's upcoming on your schedule, where are some of the places they can find both the group online and on social media?
Yeah, so definitely follow us on Instagram. That's going to be the central place to find all of the information, upcoming events, recommendations for hikes and brewery combos if you wanted to do those on your own. And then, of course, to sign up through Meetup. So all of that can be found on Instagram. Our handle is Hike for Brews, and I hope you join us sometime.
And we'll be sure to put those in the episode show notes so people can check it out. Nicole, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing the great work that you're doing with your group. Definitely going to be borrowing some of the ideas, especially the icebreaker, and getting something iconic that people can pick me out from a crowd, especially on a crowded trailhead. But thank you for everything that you do for bringing folks out into your local neck of the woods and for fostering such a inclusive community. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
And that brings us to the end of this episode alongside Nicole. We extend a heartfelt thanks to her for joining us on the podcast. Be sure to follow Hiking for Brews on Instagram at Hike for Brews. And for more, be sure to check out the episode show notes. This episode of Hikes and Mics was produced by Jordan Smith. Be sure to follow her adventures on Instagram at jordan.journeys. New episodes will drop every Monday throughout the spring hiking season, with the occasional Friday bonus episode along the way. To make sure you never miss a moment of these inspiring trail stories, hit that follow or subscribe button. Your support truly keeps this community moving forward, one episode at a time. Don't forget to connect with us on Instagram at Hikes and Mics. That's where you'll find behind-the-scenes episode visuals, my own spring hiking adventures, and plenty more to keep that fresh air stoke alive as the season heats up. As we wrap up today's journey, remember, the trails are waking up, The wildflowers are on their way, and there's never been a better time to get out there and explore. So tread those happy trails, soak in the sunshine, and keep chasing what's just around that next bend. Until next time, my fellow hikers, happy hiking. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow along with him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, ursaminooroutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, ursaminooroutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order.